I'm not sure what this stitch is called. I think it's called a running lock stitch or something. My grandmother taught me this when I was a kid. She said it'll work on anything you got because you're not building clothes. You're repairing clothes. And I'm repairing my socks. I could go buy some more. And I probably will. And put these in my spare stuff. But do you know how to sew your clothes, mend your clothes? It's something that's not taught anymore. Everybody's taught to buy. Go buy some more stuff. Go to Walmart. Just go buy some more socks. Just go blah blah blah. And then people throw their clothes away. They don't even go give it to nobody else that needs clothes. Because they don't think about that. Some people do. I know some people that donate their stuff. And that's cool. I've worn hand-me-downs before. Doesn't bother me. People say you're cheap or you're tight. Well, yeah, I guess I am if that's what it is. Because that saves my money. So I can get more important things. A spool of thread is way cheaper. Now, spending a little time is way cheaper than just going and buying something every time. And the way that things are going in the economy, she grew up during the Depression, so she taught me all kind of stuff. I had to stay with her when I was young. And she taught me all kind of things. She taught me how to shoot. That woman, woo, she was an old-time homesteader. And she could shoot. And she taught me how to sew, cook, can. And that was just a common thing back then. Everybody knew how to can and smoke meats and hunt and all that. And there you go. Now that was a really big tear in there. And you sew it on the outside so that the inside is smooth against your foot. The inside of the sock looks like that, and the outside looks like a gorilla came through there. But like I said, they call it a gorilla knot. It's ugly, but very strong. Alright guys, so get you a little kit. Carry all your stuff in there. Get you some needles. Learn how to do your canvas too. Well, I've got some videos on here of the speedy stitching all. That thing is invaluable. You can sew backpacks, put a new strap on there, tents, tarps, upholstery, all kind of stuff. You can do all kind of things with that deal. It's got some really, really big needles. my grandmother had one of these, except it was a big tomato thing. And it just holds your needles. Altoid cans make a good one. You can use an Altoid can or any kind of little can. This is a sugar-free gum, some kind of cinnamon stuff. My wife. Let's see if I can get this open without spilling them. This is my wife's little thing. She has she got all the little bitty needles because she don't have humongous fingers and messed up tar again. These little pins right here, push pins. My grandmother made clothes for people. It's like a tailor. Also, she used these to hold the material together. And I used to take this little wheel. I don't have one, but it's a wheel that looked like spikes on it. And you put the pattern on there, and then you go down through there, and it made a perforated line for you to cut it out. And that's what I did for her. I'd cut out the sleeve part, and I'd cut out the collar and things like that. Like it's raining, I couldn't go outside and go hunt or shoot or cut wood or whatever. So man, we didn't have TV really. I mean, we had a black and white TV, but nothing was on there, and had a big radio, big huge radio in that old house, and that's mainly what we did. We listened to the radio, and she taught me how to sew and all that stuff. And I'll tell you, that's invaluable. It's really, I've used that skill more than I've used a lot of things. The cooking, I also do cooking. I like cooking too. And my dad, grandpa, and them, dad was a welder. He taught me how to weld, cut, fabricate, bend metal, make stuff. He made race car bodies and frames on the side. So we were in this dirt track racing thing. My mom was a lap counter, and so we would go in there, and I'd be in the pits, and I'd see all them cars. So I learned how to do engines, brake, drivetrain, differentials, all that stuff, put that together. I watched Daddy bend those pipes, and man, he didn't even use a jig or nothing. He just get that thing. He just knew how to do it. He'd done it so many times. He'd take it and he'd cut a saddle in it, and I'd help him cut saddles, and then I would grind. I was his helper, so I'd grind that out. And I'm about 7, 8 years old. I'd grind that out, and then we'd do the angles on it, and then we'd set the pipe up there, and he'd put his magnetic torpedo square on there, and he'd get the angle right, and then he'd make the engine compartment, he'd make a roll cage, then he'd put the panels in there for the floor, and we'd put it on a metal brake and bend the metal and do all that, and it had to be a certain weight, and then we'd weigh it, and then he'd cut some holes where he needed to get weight off of it and balance it, because the dirt track just goes left all the time. So the frames were bent, were a little different, so that they could take on the high bank side, and that bigger tire on the outside and the smaller tire on the inside, so it would hug the corners. And then of course, that when they raced, it was a lot of times on, it was past my bedtime, so I didn't get to go, but we could sit in our house. Grandmother, I didn't get to go to race or whatever that night, so we would sit on the porch, and my grandmother and I would listen to the races that were about, I don't know, probably 5 to 7 miles away, and we would listen to those races, and you could hear how many times they crossed or went around the track, and when the race was over. And I was supposed to be in bed, but she would let me stay up, which was really cool. And she was a really cool person, influential. And guys, I'm gonna tell you, man, if you got older people, you know, in your family, grandmas, grandpas, stuff like that, you really need to go to those people and ask them how they survived during that time, because it's a really vanishing access point of knowledge that no longer exists. Like that book, The Lost Ways. I don't know if y'all have that or not. It's a pretty good book. You might want to get that. The Lost Ways. I was looking at that and I was like, dude, most all of it I knew, because that's what my family did. That's how we lived. My paternal grandfather, great grandfather, was a sharecropper, so he taught me, and he was Caddo, Choctaw, and French. And my paternal grandmother was Cherokee, so they taught me how to farm and grow plant that way, putting a little fish in the hole. Taught me the Three Sisters method of farming. They all complement each other. The beans put nitrogen in the soil. The squash shades the plants so they don't dry out. And so you got beans, corn, and squash all together that help each other. And they don't have to look pretty. They don't have to look pretty. All it's got to do is functionality. If you're going to build people clothes, you know, you need to go learn how to be a seamstress or whatever. But now, I have a sock that is not going to tear anymore. And I'll get a few more years out of it. And it's ugly. It's not pretty, but it was tore all the way up the side. So, guys, go talk to those older people that you have in your family. And if you don't, go to the VA, the VFWs, go to the senior care clinics, talk to the volunteer there, and start talking to those people. They are more than willing to share their information with you because they understand it now. They understand that these times now are it's going to go back. All societies eventually go back to the tribe, village route, all through the centuries. And even though we've got all this technology, all it takes is one electromagnetic pulse, grand solar thing, they call it a flare, like the one that happened back in the old times, that took out the telegraphs. Electric storm from the sun hit the telegraph. You can study that, look that up. It took out all the telegraph wires that they had up there. We just didn't have all this technology that we do now. And you can use a Faraday cage to keep some of your electronics. There's stuff on YouTube. You can look that up. How to build a Faraday cage. How to protect your vehicles, older vehicles. Like I believe it's 87 down. They have a different setup. You can put your stuff in a Faraday cage, your coil, your distributor, battery cables, or something else. Can't remember exactly what it is. The old tractors, the 58 Fords and stuff like that. What I was taught was that you can take, if that happens, you can take your jumper cables, or your cables, your power cables leading to your negative and positive on your battery, and it reverses the poles inside the battery, so you can just take those and swap them over and put them on. You may have to charge that battery up, but you can make a charger with a bicycle and an alternator and charge it up. It's the same way that they used in World War II to make power on a deserted island. They had what they call coast watchers, and they they would put these people on these Pacific islands, and they had no electricity there, so they'd have this little bicycle looking thing. It didn't have a tire on the back, but it had an armature on there, and as you pedaled it, it created electricity that went to the radio unit, and those spotters on those islands would look for Japanese troop transports coming up and down those straits, and then they would come in and they would radio, and they only had a certain amount of time that they could do that before they got triangulated and found their position. So they would do that. They would do a short burst, Morse code, and then they would cut it off, and then they would move, and they would have their stuff set up to where they didn't leave a lot of tracks. And so you can make a generator that way with a car alternator. One of the things, like a Faraday cage, you could take all that off, put it inside a Faraday cage. You make ammo boxes, large metal boxes. You insulate it from the metal box so that the electricity comes down from the flare, and they got weapons like that now that'll come down, hit the outside of the box, never touch what's inside because it's insulated with rubber or whatever you're using. It'll go around the box and into the ground. You put a ground rod on it or a nail, sit that on the edge of it, so that electricity comes around there and goes into the ground and is sucked up by the ground. But go talk to those older people that know this stuff. There's a plethora of information that is no longer here, that's not coming back, that's dying off as the greatest generation, and those people that lived through that Great Depression are dying off. And then you've got all these people that are relied on these electronics and electronic communications, and just think about that, they're just gone. I did an experiment one time, just to see, because I'd got pretty reliable on the electronic devices and cell phone and communications. So I just said, all right, I was listening to this man, Pastor Joe Fox, who had Viking preparedness on YouTube. And I was listening to this guy, and he goes, you really want to test yourself, you need to just disconnect from everything and then do a dry run. And so I was like, that's a good challenge. So I just wanted to see, and I turned the TV off, I turned the radio off, I took the phone out of the wall, I took the cell phone, and I put it down. And literally I found myself going back at certain times when I had been texting or looking to see what news flashed up or anything. I found myself going back then, and what I did was I took this notebook and I wrote down all the times, and I did that, and for about 3 days it was almost like withdrawals from like alcohol or whatever, as I had become dependent on that device, because we didn't use a landline phone anymore, but I unplugged that too. So I became dependent on that, that constant feedback from people, and the ability to communicate with friends of mine around the world, that it just wasn't there. But what I found after that first day wasn't so bad. The second day was kind of rough. Third day, but fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh day, I got way more stuff done. So if you can put yourself in a position where you can test, okay, like this was before the COVID stuff came out, and when the COVID thing really hit and everybody was freaking out because they were locked down and couldn't go nowhere. Now we live on a homestead. It didn't bother. It just did not bother me. It was, I got things to do, and I had run that simulation with no electronics and communication, and then I started, walking. I'd go to the neighbors, talk to them, blah blah blah, whatever, and doing my stuff, and working in the garden and the farm and all stuff around here. So I suggest you try that. Just try to unplug from that cell phone. You may not be able to with your work or whatever, but just cut out the fluff. Cut the fluff off of it, to just scrolling and scrolling. You look down, and then all of a sudden you've got 45 minutes to an hour has gone that you could have been doing something else, but you're looking at weird things on the Instagram, like stupid kitty cat videos and stuff like that. So I challenge you to do that. Cut that phone out. Stop. Put that phone down and see how long it takes you, and write down every time you go back to that phone. Just put the time down, and you'll see that it pretty well follows that same thing as post-acute withdrawal and alcoholism and drug abuse when you're coming off of that and you're going through recovery. So try that. Put yourself in uncomfortable situations so that you become comfortable with uncomfortable. And so with that, I'm gonna wrap it up. And there's my ugly sock that still works. All right. Later.